We begin tonight with the issue of critical mass and the San Francisco Bike Coalition and its relationship. Our guest is Andy Thornley, who is program director of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, also serves as chair of the influential Bay Area regional group Transportation and Land Use Coalition. Welcome. What does it do when critical mass gets a bad rap in the paper, in the media, and among motorists? What does that do to your group's advocacy efforts?
Well, it certainly complicates the conversation. We spent a lot of last week answering phone calls, talking to the media and so forth, sort of managing the Chronicle's very sloppy, lazy reporting, and having to correct a lot of the misunderstandings that came out of one incident having to do with critical mass. But I would say, you know, even apart from last month's story that was reported in the Chronicle, there are often, I would say, you know, once a year this story pops up. Somehow critical mass is out of control, and I have to admit it does complicate my job. What if
it became, because of the situation, it becomes more of a pattern? What if you had to start defending it every other month, or maybe every month? Would you see it as an effective tool that you can use for what you're advocating for, which we're going to get into?
Sure.
Or does it become a hindrance?
Yeah, no, when I'd say I never defend critical mass. The conversations I have are sort of educational about what critical mass is and how it relates to the Bicycle Coalition. I always like to remind people we don't organize mass, nobody does. We don't plan critical mass, mass plans itself.
Yeah, well, that's its nature.
That's its nature.
But can I read, I want to read something from
Yeah, please.
This comes from What We Value from your website.
Yeah.
The very first item in What We Value, the San Francisco Bike Coalition. We value the urban community of San Francisco, our vibrant streets, our public spaces, our diverse people neighborhoods, and this is key, our capacity for bringing together a critical mass of people to create a new and better world. Isn't it strange you would use that word and either they borrowed it from you 20 years ago or you borrowed it from them 20 years ago?
Well, I would dispute the us and them of that statement. And that
you don't think it's a coincidence? It's right there in your first value?
I would say it's hardly a coincidence. And I would say that some of critical...
It was intended, you mean?
It was, yeah, I'm sure it was intentional. I did not write that myself, but whoever wrote that
must have known.
I will take responsibility for the Bicycle Coalition.
Good, and I appreciate, by the way, your being on the program, because a lot of the advocates in your group will do either one thing. They'll either say, no, we have nothing to do with it, or they'll dismiss it as, well, you did talk about the reporting of it, but the fact is there's always incidents out there. Yeah. There's always angry motorists, and there's always angry bicyclists.
Right. And I would say...
Every time there's critical mass.
Every time there's a critical mass,
there's angry motorists out there. Now, they may not be an incident, but they're angry out there.
Right. Every day. And I would say, on behalf of the Bicycle Coalition, on behalf of myself as a citizen of San Francisco, I very much deplore the state of society now, that we've become a very impolite, very pushy, bullying society. And for the little part that we can do at the Bicycle Coalition to foster civility.
But how do you foster? I still don't understand. Look, you choose rush hour on a Friday night.
Yeah.
That's in your face to motorists, isn't
it?
Why don't you choose 1 hour later, let's say 7 o'clock, for a pleasant ride on a Friday night social event? Well, why not a Saturday morning?
Let's review the premise of critical mass, which is it's a demonstration in the broadest sense. It's a demonstration of what would it look like if everyone rode home together on a bicycle and not in a car. It's a what if, and it's a very interesting what if.
But that would never happen.
Well, it does once a month.
But what I meant is, it will, even in your ideal world, there will always be cars and bikes.
Right.
Right. So if you have a rush hour, and if you're trying to create an ideal world, and this is supposed to be a symbolism of it, is this how you would want to symbolize how rush hour would be?
No, I don't think so. And again, I have to say,
do you ride in it?
I ride in critical mass probably every 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. I'm often in a different part of town. I'm very busy doing a lot of things, and honestly, if it doesn't suit my schedule, I probably don't get caught up in it.
But do you think it's an effect? Who are you trying to influence?
Well, I would say that critical mass as a thing is not trying to influence anybody. It's a celebration of reclaiming the city's streets and that space.
Well, but it's not what if other groups that have some legitimate concerns with the city demanded an informal, no-permit parade on rush hour. Whether that's a member of the gay community that has a gripe, from the African-American community, the traditional political groups. What if they all chose to do their demonstration on a rush hour on Friday night? Do you think that would be effective for them?
Probably in different ways and in different ways not. And at that moment, I would say that the organized, let's say, gay rights organizations would probably distance themselves and associate themselves in different ways. I'd be very suspect if an organized gay rights group said, we intend to carry out a parade without a permit.
So you would admit that
if
anarchists during a situation, let's say that something happens in Iraq, if anarchists without organization go on the streets at rush hour at 5 o'clock, you would consider that an unlawful demonstration?
I would consider it an anarchic episode, yes.
And so do you see much difference between that and running through red lights, stopping traffic, not allowing any motorists to go by? Do you see any difference between that and anarchists doing that on the streets to protest the war?
No, I think that you have to look at what critical mass is when it's doing what it wants to do properly, and that is to take the streets in a celebratory way. Critical mass is not about running red lights.
If you would go along with what I was,
I dispute the premise.
Let's look at what's going on and not why it's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because
sure, that's fair.
When anarchists, and they generally do, when there's a significant event in Iraq or Iran or whatever, they will block the intersections. They will prevent motorists from coming through. They will not have a permit. Now, it's true that you only block the intersections for how long? How long will you block an intersection? How long is the rush hour traffic tied up? How's that?
Well, again, the you being the mass that's not me. Yes, critical
mass, I apologize.
Critical mass, the ride. And again, anarchy. Anarchy is its own business.
And you admit that.
I admit that the Bike Coalition does not operate the critical mass. But I will tell you what I know about critical mass. And indeed, an average intersection might be taken over for the direction of the mass ride for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Very often the police are there directing traffic, so it cuts in on the anarchy a little when the police are there helping with it. But I would say to the extent that part of critical mass is a civil disobedience impulse, then you go back to Thoreau and you look at what that statement is about.
So that's not exactly where I was going to go next. The other side of the coin is just the opposite. And that is you don't really care what the motorists do. You're really addressing 11 members of the Board of Supervisors and the mayor to get what you want, and they may be noble, or half of them, let's say most of them would like more bike lanes, better streets, more pavement. These are the principles you're working on, right?
Sure. Yes, the you in this case being Andy, the program director of the Bike Coalition. I'll take that. Yes.
So, do you think that maybe that's why you do not have a problem with critical mass? Because in the end, because of the numbers and the nature of the demonstration, it's an intimidating factor when you go in and lobby for legislation.
I would say absolutely it's a complicating thing in those conversations, that I represent a very well-organized political interest group of folks who want to be able to ride around this city as if it was a normal thing. And to that extent, in conversations like this, or with supervisors or community leaders, the confusion of the Bike Coalition and critical mass does complicate the conversation when I have to pull it apart. It assists us, but it also impedes us.
Why?
Well, it impedes us because we have conversations like this that get in the way of my talking about the actual policy work that we do. So it is a complication.
But in 1990, actually, the article that critical mass has, and by the way, critical masses are done in almost 420 cities around the world.
Indeed.
Every continent except Antarctica. So it's not just San Francisco, it began in San Francisco. But like Willie Brown, coming in from the assembly, was considered one of the most, and was one of the most powerful men in America. And he had his way with almost every interest group except one, critical mass, and he thought he could stop them.
Yeah.
The day that he could not stop them is the day you began to see a lot more bike lanes, and I'm sure you had meetings with him. Admit that. You had meetings with him.
The bike and public conversations with the mayor, in 1997.
And private meetings, too, I'm sure.
Probably. I was just a citizen then.
Oh, okay. Well, I think they did.
Yeah.
And you'd have to admit that it was effective.
It was effective. It was effective to the extent that Mayor Brown, who was used to being able to call whoever was responsible in and talk to them, was at a loss. There wasn't someone to call in and talk to them. And in that vacuum, the Bike Coalition served, as we're serving again, to be the focal point of trying to get a handle on this thing that's very vague and nebulous. And so, yes, in that sense, Willie was confounded a little bit, but I think it worked out well for everybody.
Did it change the tenor of critical mass as a Friday night event?
I think what happened in that case was that the police learned how to handle it in a more anarchic way, in their own way. They went off the book a little bit. And
how's that?
Well, that they don't, for several years now, they have not cracked down on every specific infraction. They've moved the bikes through because they understand that moving the bike traffic is better than stopping the bike traffic. I've had phone calls from heads of police departments all over the country wanting advice on how they can run their critical masses better. So it's become a model for other police departments.
But the day that you saw a steady stream of incidents, it would no longer, the politicians would be unable to prevent that style of policing. In other words, at a certain point, you have to admit that if the incidents continue on a more regular basis, it would not be an effective tool for bicyclists and their advocates.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. As with anything, in medias res, right, the Greeks knew best, mediation and moderation in all things. And in this case, again, last month's ride that I wasn't in on, and I've only heard from witnesses, had a couple of icky moments. It was nothing really worse than ever. But
you mean these incidents have been occurring?
These incidents have been occurring on and off for 15 years.
Have cars been brushing bicyclists, and have bicyclists been destroying cars?
Cars have been killing bicyclists.
No, in the critical mass.
In critical mass?
Have they been
there have been brush-ups. Yeah, absolutely. You've got
intentional?
I think the cars mean it, and probably the bicyclists mean it too. Yeah, I think.
So what made this?
The accidental part is not there. No.
Is this? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about intentional. Do you believe that this was just a reporting incident, or is it an incident that incidents like this occur every time critical mass runs?
I hear that incidents like this happen fairly often, and again, I think
damage to cars too.
Damage to cars, damage to bikes. And things that really are honestly avoidable. And I'll tell you right now, we are absolutely against that. We actively encourage polite, courteous, thoughtful behavior because that's how it's going to work. And back to our mission statement, our vision of the city with healthy, cooperative streets is about that. Even before last month's ride, we were starting to work with the police department on outreach to cyclists. Give and get respect. Share the road. Take your turn. We're working with the police department on this campaign.
Critical Mass actually states at their website that red lights and stop signs are not for bicyclists in general. They were designed for cars. Do you believe that? Does
I don't believe that. No, the Bike Coalition doesn't believe
that. Should bicyclists stop at every stop sign?
They should stop at every stop sign to the extent that it is the law, and also for the sake of safety and courtesy.
Should they be cited like cars?
They should, they are, but you know what we're working on now, a program of diversion, which is to say that the police cite a cyclist for running a red light, and they will have the option to go to a bike education class, which is one of our big programs. We educate bicyclists all over the city.
Okay, that's where you and I totally agree. Please go on with that program, because I've seen too many cyclists go through at red lights. We have to go, unfortunately, right now. But you've been very kind to come on the program. You knew that we were going to take a little bit of a ribbing because of what happened. Let's hope it doesn't happen again for the sake of both the bicyclists and the motorists.
Indeed. Thanks, Art.
Thank you. And stay tuned. We'll be right back.